The laughter was harsh and loud, echoing off the gray concrete walls of the TSA screening area at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Marcus Webb, 34 years old and 2 years into his position as a transportation security officer, stood with his arms crossed and a smirk that radiated the petty authority of someone who had found a target for his boredom. Before him, standing with patient stillness in the secondary screening area, was Daniel Morrison, 79 years old, wearing a faded denim jacket and holding a small canvas travel bag that looked older than most of the other passengers in the terminal. But it was what hung around Daniel's neck that had caught Webb's attention and triggered his cruel amusement. 2 military dog tags on a ball chain, the metal dulled with age, hung outside his jacket. Webb had seen plenty of people wearing dog tags over the years, mostly young men trying to look tough or military wannabes playing dress-up. This old man fit perfectly into that category as far as Webb was concerned. "Sir, I'm going to need to inspect those," Webb said, his voice dripping with theatrical authority as he gestured at the dog tags. His 2 colleagues, younger TSA officers named Rodriguez and Kim, watched from their positions at nearby screening stations. The morning rush was over, and they were grateful for any entertainment to break up the monotony of checking IDs and scanning bags. Daniel slowly removed the dog tags from around his neck, his weathered hands moving with the deliberate economy of advanced age. The chain made a soft metallic sound as he handed it to Webb, who held it up to the fluorescent lighting as if examining a piece of evidence in a crime investigation. The tags were genuine military issue, stamped with name, service number, blood type, and religious preference. But Webb had made up his mind before he even looked at them. "These are supposed to be real military dog tags?" Webb asked loudly, making sure his voice carried to the other passengers and TSA officers. "Did you buy these at an Army surplus store? Because I've seen real dog tags, and these look like costume jewelry." Several passengers in the regular screening line turned to watch the confrontation. An elderly woman looked concerned. A businessman checked his watch impatiently. 2 college students pulled out their phones, sensing potential social media content. Daniel met Webb's gaze with pale blue eyes that held depths the younger man couldn't comprehend. "They're real," he said simply, his voice quiet and carrying the slight rasp of age. "From my service in Vietnam." The answer only fueled Webb's need to dominate and humiliate. He had developed a talent over his 2 years in TSA for identifying people he perceived as weak or unlikely to fight back, and this frail old man fit perfectly into that category. What Webb didn't know was that his performance was being observed by someone who recognized exactly who Daniel Morrison was and understood the magnitude of the mistake that was about to unfold. Sarah Chen, a 28-year-old FBI analyst, stood in the regular security line with her carry-on bag and laptop case. She had been on her way to catch a flight to New York for a field office meeting when she noticed the confrontation. More specifically, she had noticed Daniel Morrison. Her grandfather had served in Vietnam with Daniel, and their family had photographs from reunions over the decades. She knew exactly who this man was and what those dog tags represented. Her hand was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found the direct number for FBI Director James Patterson. Webb continued his performance, holding the dog tags up for his colleagues to see. "Look at this, guys. We've got a stolen Valor case here. This old man is pretending to be a veteran, walking around with fake dog tags trying to get sympathy and free drinks at bars." Rodriguez and Kim exchanged uncomfortable glances. Neither of them had Webb's taste for cruelty, but challenging him in front of passengers would create drama they didn't want to deal with. They stayed silent, and their silence became complicity. Daniel's expression didn't change. He had encountered Marcus Webb's type before, many times over many decades. Young men drunk on small authority, confusing power with wisdom, believing that the ability to inconvenience others somehow made them important. He had learned long ago that some people couldn't be educated with words, only with consequences. "I can show you my DD-214 discharge papers," Daniel offered quietly, reaching for his wallet. "They're in my bag." Webb waved dismissively. Oh, I'm sure you've got all kinds of fake documents. The internet makes it easy to create that stuff these days. What I want to know is why you're trying to impersonate a military veteran. That's a federal crime, you know. I could have you arrested right now. The threat hung in the air, absurd and cruel. Several passengers had stopped even pretending to mind their own business and were openly watching the confrontation. Sarah Chen had moved to the side of the security area, phone pressed to her ear. Her call had gone through on the first ring. Director Patterson's office, the assistant answered. This is FBI analyst Sarah Chen, ID number 8479921. I need to speak with Director Patterson immediately. It's urgent and relates to a situation involving Daniel Morrison. There was a brief pause. Sarah knew that name would get immediate attention. Within 15 seconds, Director Patterson's voice came on the line. Agent Chen, what's happening? Sir, I'm at Reagan National Terminal B Security. TSA officer is publicly humiliating Daniel Morrison, accusing him of stolen valor regarding his dog tags. The situation is escalating, and there are witnesses recording on phones. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. When Patterson's voice returned, it carried the cold precision of a man who had just shifted into crisis management mode. Do not let Morrison leave that area. I'm 12 minutes away in my detail vehicle. Keep me on the line. Back at the security checkpoint, Webb had taken his performance to a new level. He had called for his supervisor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Janet Foster, who emerged from the TSA office with the expression of someone who knew she was about to deal with a problem. Marcus, what's going on? Foster asked, already suspecting that whatever it was had more to do with Webb's ego than actual security concerns. This gentleman is wearing what appear to be fake military dog tags, Webb announced, still holding Daniel's identification. I believe we have a stolen valor situation and should contact airport police to investigate further. Foster looked at Daniel, taking in his weathered face, his patient posture, the quality of quiet dignity that couldn't be faked. She had been in security work for 30 years and had developed instincts about people that Webb's arrogance prevented him from cultivating. Sir, do you have identification and discharge papers? She asked, her voice significantly more respectful than Webb's. Daniel nodded slowly and reached into his canvas bag. He pulled out a worn leather wallet and extracted several documents that he handed to Foster. She examined them carefully while Webb shifted impatiently beside her. The DD-214 discharge form was authentic, dated January 15, 1969. The military ID showed a much younger version of Daniel's face, but it was the third document that made Foster's blood run cold. It was a faded photocopy of a citation, and at the top were the words, Medal of Honor. Her hands actually trembled slightly as she read the summary. Staff Sergeant Daniel Morrison, United States Marine Corps, had been awarded the nation's highest military honor for actions during the Tet Offensive in 1968. The citation described how he had held a defensive position for 72 hours against overwhelming enemy forces, allowing the evacuation of over 200 civilians from a contested village. He had been wounded 3 times, refused evacuation, and personally accounted for over 40 enemy combatants. Foster's face had gone pale. She looked up at Webb with an expression that mixed fury with horror. Marcus, go to my office right now and wait for me there, she said, her voice shaking with controlled anger. Webb's confidence finally cracked slightly. What? Why? I'm just doing my job and go to my office now, Foster repeated, and this time there was no mistaking the order. Webb opened his mouth to argue, then saw something in Foster's expression that made him think better of it. He walked away, his swagger diminished, but his anger growing with every step. Foster turned to Daniel and did something that shocked every TSA officer and passenger watching. She came to attention and saluted. Mr. Morrison, I apologize profusely for how you've been treated. This is completely unacceptable and does not represent the values of our agency or our respect for veterans. Daniel returned the salute with the casual precision of someone for whom the gesture was second nature, despite decades away from active service. No apology necessary, ma'am. The young man didn't know, But Janet Foster knew that the situation was far from over. A Medal of Honor recipient had been publicly humiliated by federal security personnel, and the incident had been recorded on multiple phones. This was going to become a national news story within hours, and heads were going to roll. What she didn't know was that the situation was about to escalate far beyond her authority to manage. The distinctive sound of multiple vehicles arriving at high speed outside the terminal caught everyone's attention. Through the massive windows, passengers and TSA officers alike could see 3 black SUVs with government plates pull up to the curb in a no-parking zone, accompanied by 2 marked Capitol Police motorcycles. The lead vehicle's doors opened and 4 people emerged, moving with the purposeful coordination of a professional security detail. The lead figure was unmistakable even at distance: FBI Director James Patterson, whose face was recognizable to anyone who followed national news or politics. The group moved through the terminal with the kind of authority that made crowds part instinctively. Director Patterson was 56 years old, a former Marine himself who had risen through FBI ranks through a combination of brilliant investigative work and uncompromising integrity. He had served 2 tours in Iraq and understood military culture at a fundamental level. More importantly, he knew exactly who Daniel Morrison was. They had met twice before at Medal of Honor Society functions, and Patterson had read Morrison's full classified after-action reports from Vietnam. He knew things about Daniel's service that weren't in the public citations, operations that remained classified decades later. Patterson walked directly to Daniel, and without hesitation or concern for protocol or witnesses, came to attention and rendered a salute that was held for a full 5 seconds. "Colonel Morrison," Patterson said, using Daniel's retired rank rather than his enlisted rank at time of award. "It's an honor to see you again, sir." "I apologize that this happened." Daniel returned the salute, a slight smile touching his weathered face. "Director Patterson, you didn't need to come all the way out here. It was just a misunderstanding." "With respect, sir, no it wasn't," Patterson said, his voice carrying clearly through the security area. "It was a disgrace, and it's going to be addressed fully." He turned to face the assembled TSA officers and passengers, his voice rising to carry through the terminal. "For those who don't know, you are in the presence of Medal of Honor recipient Daniel Morrison. On February 2nd, 1968, during the Tet Offensive, then Staff Sergeant Morrison held a defensive position in Hughes City for 72 hours against battalion-strength enemy forces. He was wounded 3 times and refused evacuation. His actions allowed the successful evacuation of over 200 Vietnamese civilians and prevented the collapse of an entire defensive sector. He personally accounted for over 40 enemy combatants and saved the lives of at least a dozen Marines in his unit. Patterson paused, letting his words sink in. Those dog tags that were mocked as fake costume jewelry represent a man who exemplifies everything this nation should honor. They represent sacrifice, courage, and dedication at a level that most of us can barely comprehend. He turned his attention to Janet Foster. "Where is the officer who initiated this incident?" Foster pointed toward her office. "I sent him there to wait, Director." "Get him out here. Now." Foster moved quickly, returning moments later with Marcus Webb, whose face had shifted from anger to growing concern as he took in the scene. The FBI director, the security detail, the crowd of witnesses, and Daniel Morrison standing calmly at the center of it all. Patterson addressed Webb directly, his voice cold enough to freeze water. "Officer Webb, do you understand what you've done? You publicly humiliated a Medal of Honor recipient, accused a genuine war hero of stolen valor, and threatened him with arrest for having the audacity to wear his own identification tags." Webb's face had gone pale. His mouth opened and closed several times as he searched for words that wouldn't come. The full magnitude of his error was finally penetrating his ego, and the result was visible panic. I didn't know," he finally managed. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know," Patterson cut him off. "You saw an elderly man and decided he was an easy target for your authority complex. You made assumptions based on age and appearance rather than actually investigating." That's not security work, that's bullying with a badge. The director turned to Foster. I want a full report on this incident on my desk by end of business today. I will be following up with your agency director personally. Officer Webb should be suspended pending investigation, and I strongly recommend termination. Foster nodded. Understood, Director. It will be done. But Daniel Morrison, showing the same grace he had demonstrated throughout the entire ordeal, stepped forward. Director, if I may. Patterson turned to him with respectful attention. Of course, sir. This young man made a mistake, Daniel said quietly, looking at Webb with the same patient expression he had maintained from the beginning. He didn't know, and sometimes the only way we learn is through our errors. I don't want to see his career destroyed over this. Let it be a teaching moment instead of an ending. The mercy was stunning. Here was a man who had been publicly humiliated, threatened with arrest, and mocked for his service, offering grace to the person who had wronged him. It transformed the entire atmosphere of the confrontation. Patterson looked at Daniel with visible respect. You're a better man than most, Colonel. But this isn't just about this incident. It's about the culture that allowed it to happen and the message we send about how veterans are treated. He turned back to Webb. You've been given a gift of grace you don't deserve. If Colonel Morrison is willing to advocate for a second chance, then you'll get one. But understand this clearly. You will undergo mandatory training on veteran recognition and respect. You will write a formal apology that will be part of your permanent record. And if I ever hear of you treating any veteran with anything less than complete respect, I will personally ensure your federal career ends that day. Webb, fighting through his shock and shame, managed to find his voice. Thank you, sir. Colonel Morrison, I'm sorry. I was completely wrong. Daniel extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Webb shook it. The old Marine's grip was surprisingly firm. We all make mistakes, son. What matters is what we learn from them. The incident at Reagan National became exactly the national story Janet Foster had feared, but with an ending that transformed it from a scandal into a lesson about grace and forgiveness. Video of Director Patterson's arrival and explanation went viral, generating millions of views. Major news networks covered the story for 3 days. Daniel Morrison gave exactly one interview to a military-focused news outlet where he spoke not about his treatment, but about the importance of understanding that heroes don't always announce themselves and that age doesn't diminish service. Marcus Webb completed his remedial training and went on to become one of TSA's most respectful and veteran-aware officers. He never forgot the lesson he learned that day about the danger of assumptions and the power of grace. And Daniel Morrison returned to his quiet life, his dog tag still hanging around his neck, carrying their weight with the same humble dignity he had shown in the face of mockery. The metal tags continued to bear witness to service and sacrifice that transcended any individual's ability to mock or diminish. Where are you watching from today? Tell us in the comments about a time when appearances deceived you. Subscribe to Hidden Legends for more stories proving that heroes walk among us in the most unexpected forms.